Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this third day of the Toronto Global Forum. This LAPTI, LATAM breakfast, whatever you want to call it, is going to be a highlight of the three-day event. I can't tell you how much I enjoy your company, your vigor, and I'd also like to welcome all of those people that are joining us virtually, and not just here in Toronto and across the country, but down into the States and down into South America as well. It's really, really a great pleasure to have you here today. Before we get started with the formal program, and you can see we have a number of speakers to go through, there's somebody that I'd like to introduce you to. His name is Deputy Mayor Michael Thompson. The Deputy Mayor is a huge champion of the LATAM community, the LAPTI community. I remember I was relatively new to the Toronto Global Forum back in 2014, and he came to me and he said, Joe, you know what? We've got the Pan Am Games coming up in 2015. I need you to do some things for me because I want to really deepen my ties into the LATAM community here in Toronto. I think we've got great opportunities to help them grow their businesses and bring in their colleagues from South America so that they can work together. So I thought, oh, okay, so that's fine. We've got the Pan Am Games coming up. He said, so I need you to move your conference from the fall to July so that it's held in concert with the Pan Am Games. Okay. And he said, I need you to make sure that the LATAM community is an integral part of what we're doing for the Pan Am Games. He says it's easy here in Canada. It's easy. We've got lots of ties into the U.S., but we really need to involve the LATAM community. So you have a huge champion in the Deputy Mayor who really respects you and enjoys your company. And on that note, I will turn it over to Deputy Mayor Michael Thompson.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm delighted to participate virtually in the 15th edition of the Toronto Global Forum. The City of Toronto has been a key sponsor of the forum since it began, and I'm glad to be introducing this hybrid in-person virtual session in our great city of Toronto. This year's theme is Redefining a New Prosperity. This three-day series of compelling, real-time conversation amongst global leaders will explore what it will take to build a resilient, sustainable, and a more equitably recovery from the global disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the better part of the last 2 years, the virus has battered the global economy and fundamentally changed the way we live, work, and communicate. This morning's discussion will focus on topics related to Toronto's Latin American Bilateral Trade Initiative, also known as LAPTI. The City of Toronto and our diplomatic community launched LAPTI 5 years ago to support Latin American business owners and professionals living and working in the Greater Toronto Area. LAPTI's mission is to strengthen Toronto's economy and its businesses by tapping into the knowledge and network of our dynamic Latin American businesses and our counselor community. This year's Latin American Breakfast program is our most impressive yet. Today, we will be joined by ambassadors from across Latin America who will share with us their knowledge and expertise. The topics they will address is the road to sustainable and inclusive recovery in Latin America in a post-COVID world. It is important to recognize that these experts will share their knowledge and expertise. I will leave it now to Joe Clark to introduce this amazing, illustrious panel of members of the Counselor Corps. Joe, over to you. I want to wish everyone an amazing conference, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in person next year. Thank you so much. Have an amazing conference. Gracias.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. So as Councillor Thompson has indicated, we have assembled a really, really illustrious group of ambassadors to speak to a number of issues. And so what I'm going to do is introduce each one of them individually, but rather than you having to look this way so everybody just sees the side of your face, I'm going to go down here and introduce you so you look forward, okay?
Thank you.
So, table one, we have Her Excellency Martinez, the Ambassador of Argentina to Canada. Next, His Excellency Fernandez, the Ambassador of Chile to Canada. And I know my pronunciation is going to get worse and worse and worse, so please excuse me. His Excellency Londano, Ambassador of Colombia to Canada. This one's easy. His Excellency Ortiz, the Ambassador of Costa Rica to Canada. His Excellency Stacy, Ambassador of Ecuador to Canada.
Thank you, Stacy.
This could cause me a problem. I met this gentleman last night. His Excellency Cisneros, Ambassador of El Salvador to Canada. Is that close? It's okay.
You apologize beforehand. Thank you.
His Excellency Rodriguez, the Ambassador of Peru to Canada. And last, but certainly not least, His Excellency Vidal, the Ambassador of Uruguay to Canada. So, folks, what we're going to do here is we've got a couple of questions that we're going to pose to each one of the ambassadors. It's the same question because we want the context from country to country in terms of how various countries in South America are dealing with the pandemic, how they're going to come out of the pandemic, and basically stronger than ever. So it's going to be the same question. I won't need to repeat it, but I will introduce the ambassadors as I ask the first question. So question one, and starting with Her Excellency Martinez, what lessons has your country learned from the pandemic, and what are the main strategies adopted to reach social and economic recovery in a sustainable and innovative way? Your Excellency?
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Buenos días a todos. First of all, let me thank the organizer of the Toronto Global Forum for their invitation, as well as to you, Mr. Joe Clark. Thank you so much for your introduction. You nailed it with the names and last names, so that was very good. And of course, my fellow ambassadors and all the participants. It's always good. It's always good to be between friends. So thank you for coming today. You posed us a very important question as far as what lessons we have learned from the pandemic. And we think that one of the main lessons from the pandemic, and I believe this is not only for my country, but for every country, is that multilateralism and cooperation are more necessary than ever. We have seen how difficult it was for our countries to coordinate policies on subjects such as vaccine procurement, vaccine recognition, and passports. We're even discussing these issues nowadays. So the pandemic, in fact, hastened economic and social trends that were already pre-existing. And failure to achieve a comprehensive approach would only aggravate the problems created by the increased global inequality. And let me at this point recall the message delivered by Argentina at the Finance in Common Summit a couple of weeks ago in the context of the Italian presidency of the G20, and we addressed this issue in particular, stressing that the world is already experiencing a two-speed recovery, which means that once again, many will be left behind. So we certainly believe that we have to work to build a new multilateralism oriented towards the development of the most vulnerable countries, if we are to avoid the catastrophic consequences that such a gap would generate in a post-pandemic world. In this sense, we believe that the international community at all of us, we need a wide-ranging and inclusive debate to rethink the recovery. Middle-income countries such as mine, such as Argentina, we cannot afford the luxury of keeping the same productive structure that prevailed in our countries during the past century, one that is based on exports of primary goods and a manufacturing industry focused on the internal market. Our societies demand and need a strategic vision to adapt to these profound changes in the global environment. Conventional wisdom says that the future belongs to those societies that rely on knowledge, education, science, and technology. Even nowadays, when we look across the globe, the wealthiest and fairest societies are those that have invested heavily in science and innovation. And that is why it is our belief that we need to keep improving the quality and reach of our educational systems, making sure the whole population has access to ICT-related tools. Argentina is nowadays promoting a set of driving sectors that would enable progress towards more inclusive and sustainable development. Among them, these include renewable energy sources, universalization of the digital transformation, the bioeconomy, and the circular economy, among others. Emerging from this crisis is as much as a productive and technological challenge as it is a social and political one. So for us, our position is that the pursuit of equality will determine the chances we have to success. I thank you for your attention.
Wow, that was really very interesting. And Argentina's kind of got to be very proud of itself, not only for the direction that it's going in, but also your representation in Canada.
Thank you.
His Excellency Fernandez from Chile, same question to you. Lessons learned from the pandemic, the strategies that you think we're going to need to reach social and economic recovery in a sustainable and innovative way. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. Well, we are facing a painful period as a result of COVID-19. Many families have lost their loved ones, and measures like lockdown have also resulted in deep economic consequences for the population. How we have addressed this complex situation? First, containing or trying to contain the disease, reinforcing the health system, and trying to help to mitigate its impact in the economy. In this regard, we made a great effort to close deal in a very early stage with pharmaceutical in order to get the vaccine. And we joined COVAX also, that is a global mechanism to receive a vaccine. As the result of this effort, well, 90% of the Chilean population has already received the first and second shot, and 30% of the population have received a third shot. And also we are we are started to vaccine children from 6 to 11 years old. But we consider that it's not only a situation for us. We need to have a collaboration, as Josefina said before, and we focus in two things. as we close deals with vaccination, pharmaceuticals, pharmaceutical, we share some vaccine with our neighbors. And second, we propose at the World Health Organization a treaty to preparedness for future disease and pandemics. I think that today we are facing a very complicated scenario, but we have to prepare for the future also. And the second element that I was to raise is that in order to help the people who are suffering, especially for the long lockdown, well, we have allocated 30 million US dollars. That means that we are to the people's directly allocation and for the small and medium business enterprise. And then it means that we have spent an equivalent of 10% of our GDP. Well, it's very negative in that way, but it's positive that today, if you have, I would like to highlight that in 2020, the growth was minus 5.8%. But this year, we are going to grow 11%. And that is a good news for Chile and for the neighborhood too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Table 2, you've got a challenge, huh? I mean, holy smokes, these guys are pretty hot. So hot, in fact, he blew his mic, so I think you should be all right, correct?
Hello, hello, hello. This one? Okay.
So, His Excellency Londono, the same question to you. Lessons learned from the pandemic. How are you getting out of the pandemic, and what lies ahead? Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the organizers for inviting Colombia to this event. There are learnings on several fronts. In health, we have seen that rich countries have about 80% of vaccines production. It means that the international community needs to work harder to improve the vaccines deployment, not only for COVID-19, but also for new illness to come. In social issues, we have seen that women and youth have been more affected by the pandemic than other groups in our society. Also, it is essential to note that poverty and inequalities have increased because the informal labor market, which was more affected because of the lockdowns. This market represents 50% of the total labor market in Colombia. Colombia has been working very hard with the international community to procure enough vaccines. Our goal is to reach 70% of our eligible population completely vaccinated by December 2021. Today, we have almost 60% of our eligible people already vaccinated. Colombia has increased the economic support for vulnerable people and businesses, especially those affected by the pandemic. This extra expense cost and this extra expense is funded by a tax reform law recently approved by our National Congress. And Colombia has implemented reforms to give the youth access to university without cost and has implemented economic stimulus for companies to employ people between 18 and 28 years old. Now, the Colombian GDP will grow about 10% in 2021 We have recovered more than 80% of the employment lost during the pandemic, and our inflation rate is under 5%. But our central bank has already raised the interest rate to address this issue. We are very confident that in 2022, we are going to be stronger than in 2019.
Very well done. You know, really interesting stuff. Raising the interest rates already and getting ahead of the curve and so on is really good to hear. Delighted as well to have your president here as well during the Toronto Global Forum. So thank you for those comments.
Yes. I think that there are two measures that our government already took very important. We already did the tax reform, and we already raised our interest rate in order to address the inflation.
And moving faster than most other countries are. Congratulations. Well done. His Excellency Ortiz of Costa Rica, tell me about what your country is doing during the pandemic, how you're coping with it, and where you expect to be in the next couple of months next year.
Well, first of all, thank you for the organizers for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here with my colleagues. As dreamed by Bolívar in the South, Martí in the Caribbean, and Francisco Morazán in Central America, united Latin America. That's how we have to face the situation and solve our problems. Thank you, our consul in Toronto, Jorge Umaña, for making this invitation possible. And we have on the floor also our dear ambassador of Panama, Romy Vasquez, that is with us here. Thank you, Romy, for coming from Ottawa to Toronto to participate. To understand how tiny Costa Rica, that is the size of Nova Scotia, is in a situation where by 2022 we're going to be growing for 4.5 to 5% of our GDP. We have lowered poverty in the last months 3 points. In a few weeks, we're going to have 80% of our population vaccinated on the first shot and 65% of our population vaccinated on second shot. We have to understand how we start and where are we now. The road of prosperity begins in Costa Rica very early. Just once we became independent in 1821, in that time, most of the first head of states were military. In Costa Rica, our first head of state was a school teacher. So that set the North, you know, towards a different road, a different path. In 1870, we declared free and obligatory education for all. That means for men, women. That was a very important step. In 1940, we create our institutions to have health universal coverage in the country. In 1949, we took a major decision to abolish the army and to invest on education, health, the environment, and infrastructure. In 1974, we created our national parks and start the road to protect our forestry by 32% of our territory and have a coverage of 55% of forestry in the country. And 2018, our president, a young president, Carlos Alvarado, launched the decarbonization plan with our vice president, Epsi Campbell, by the way, the first Afro-Costa Rican president in the hemisphere. And those decisions that we took are the fundamental pillars that we face, that help us to face in 2019 the pandemic. That Costa Rica suffered very much, like all of the countries, our region. Our economic and social situation was hit very strongly. But, as I said, with those decisions and those institutions, in the oldest democracy of Latin America, we were able to face and confront not the storm, the hurricane that we are facing now. We are not out of the woods right now, but we are optimistic that we will overcome and reach a safe port for our population. So the question that Mr. Joe asked me, Mr. Clark, what are the lessons learned from Costa Rica? I will say that if you invest on people, on planet, and dedicate the military expenditure in those areas, you will face and will be ready and better prepared to confront difficult situations as the COVID and the pandemic. So we are optimistic, even though we have big challenges. We have to combat poverty, we have to combat corruption, we have to combat narco-traffic, but on a democracy that have strong institutions, that operate independently, we will overcome this difficult situation.
Mr. Ambassador, that was really interesting to be able to have that historic sort of, decade by decade kind of approach and sort of the history of what's happened in Costa Rica puts everything into context. So I really appreciate that history lesson. That was excellent. His Excellency Stacy, the Ambassador of Ecuador to Canada.
Yes.
Question to you.
Well,
pandemic.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to this very early breakfast today. That shows the interest of the participants and the fellow colleagues here in Toronto. Well, several lessons are learned of these challenging times and worldwide response to COVID-19. Maybe one of the most important is that no one should be left behind by discrimination, place of residence, socioeconomic status, and vulnerability to shocks, as was proclaimed at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to achieve a strong, united, and safe world. Certainly, the international call for solidarity proved to be not sufficient to trigger a rapid and uniform response humanitarian aid to timely provide assistance to many, especially low-income nations that may have to wait until 2023 or 2024 to receive sufficient vaccines supplies to immunize the whole population. At the same time, despite WHO efforts, a comprehensive international approach to deal effectively with common rules to improve globally the connectivity and containment of the virus is still a pending issue. Another lesson learned is that the fight against COVID-19 needs an interinstitutional response. All stakeholders, public and private, in every country have an important role to play beyond the sacrifice of essential workers who deserve our most gratitude. In this effort, diplomacy was another valuable tool to support and assist national communities abroad, especially the most vulnerable, as well with repatriation arrangements for humanitarian flights during the whole lockdown of borders and airports. I would like to ask an applause to our consuls. At the same time, diplomacy was instrumental in the area of cooperation for the needs and constraints of medical sector, obtaining important humanitarian assistance to alleviate the medical and health requirements derived from the pandemic. The generalized crisis due to COVID-19 in Ecuador has impacted a large part of the economy, evolving a chain effect in various sectors that resulted in an increase of unemployment rate and a considerable drop in income, falling commodities and raw materials exports, increase of informal trade and services, collapse of tourism revenues, and partial suspension of productivity and activities related to that. After several setbacks and initial difficulties that shows the weakness of the public health system in Ecuador, the country achieved the most successful vaccination process that triggered social and economic recovery and back to normal life. The strategy was based on an ambitious plan to vaccinate 9 million people in just 100 days, starting May 2021. And as November 3rd, 2021, more doses have been applied than that objective, 22 million, of which 12 million correspond to first application and 10 million to second doses, as 60,000 boosters. This positive outcome was in part due to a national, well-conceived and managing process, and also a timely negotiation of vaccines with different laboratories and the generous support of countries like the US, China, Canada, Spain, and Chile, among others. Thanks to the close work with international and regional organizations like the World Bank, IDB, CAF, UNICEF, WHO, and UNHCR, Ecuador was one of the first countries to receive World Bank funds to respond to the health emergency and later for the vaccination process. During the whole pandemic, the Ecuadorian government put in place emergency funds to support the most vulnerable population in form of household vouchers, issued regulations to prevent unjustified job layoffs, and at the same time, to keep the economy functioning, fiscal stimulus were adopted to benefit small and medium business. Unfortunately, informal workers, for its characteristics, remained out of these benefits. As a result of such measures and the progress of vaccination, there are now signs of reactivation, especially in employment, tax revenues, and bank deposits, projecting a slowly recovery of the productive sector. I would like to say finally that the resilience of the country served to unite everyone around a single goal, to save lives. This has been the largest social mobilization in Ecuador's history. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I think that resilience is such a strong word. That the country looks like it is resilient and making its way back. Congratulations. Thank you for those comments. Now, I'm going to try this again, and hopefully I do better than the first time. His Excellency Cisternos.
Yesterday we agree you will call me Ricardo. So perfect. Let's call me Ricardo.
Thank you for that. So over to you, sir. In terms of what El Salvador has experienced in the pandemic, is it on its way through? What kind of road ahead?
Perfect. Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much also for the organizers to invite us to participate to this forum. So first of all, as all my colleagues mentioned, COVID imposed obviously enormous efforts for all our governments. And the government of the President Nayib Bukele had to challenge obviously health, economic, and social challenges. First of all, our priority was health of our population. Very early, we closed borders, and when it was possible, we began with the immunization of all our population. We benefit from COVAX initiatives, and thanks to the donation of friend countries, we've been able to immunize most of our population. And we immunize also any foreigners present in El Salvador, regardless of his migratory status. The population of El Salvador is 6.5 million, and so far we have administered 8.5 million doses, which means that 60% of our population is already fully vaccinated. Obviously, we provided some support for our SMEs, for all the productive sectors of El Salvador, and we began the process of support of all the productive sector of our country. We also provide some security food for our most vulnerable populations in rural areas, providing some basket foods for all these populations. Probably what was the innovative approach of the government of El Salvador was on the approach, a more comprehensive approach that we had. For example, instead of renovating the existing hospitals in El Salvador, the government decided to create a new one, a brand new hospital that was launched, Hospital of El Salvador, that was launched in March 2020. And this was part of the program for vaccination of all our population. Second, I think like all the countries, we realize how fundamental it is to have digital communication, virtual meetings, and online education. So, from our point of view, we consider that the pandemic has accelerated the digital divide between the countries. El Salvador is obviously conscious about this situation, and one of the measures that we decided to take is, at the beginning of this year, is to distribute computers to most of our students in the public education system. The plan overall will be to distribute 1.2 million of laptops to the different students in order to help them to integrate the global and digital economy. Furthermore, we're going ahead and we are trying to develop a more comprehensive approach on education, trying to integrate innovation in our system. It goes from young population regulations up to integrating teenagers into the digital world. So I would say probably in conclusion, our most learning was that solidarity matters. We stay strong with our population, trying to keep it healthy, trying to immunize everyone as soon as we were able to do it. We also share part of our vaccines with the neighboring countries when it was needed. In that sense, I think multilateral organizations need to continue working together to increase the possibility to vaccinate most of the populations. Secondly, I would say that nobody can be left beside. Someone already mentioned that here around this table. Digitalization is very important when we have to include everyone in the global world, in the global economy, and we still have some opportunities, but that is part of my second question, I suppose. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Ricardo, and thank you for allowing me to be so informal with you. Lesson learned there. Your government moved in March 2020 with a new hospital. It had that kind of foresight in terms of what was going to be necessary. That's a big learning for the rest of the world, is that your country moved so quickly to respond to the pandemic. His Excellency Rodriguez, the Ambassador of Peru to Canada. Now you're going to tell us all of the great things that Peru has done to wade through this horrible pandemic and how the future looks for the country.
I try to do my best. First of all, many thanks to the organizers, Toronto Global Forum and the City Council of Toronto, for allowing me to address to such a distinguished gathering. I'm going to do give you a snapshot of what's going on right now in Peru and to comment on the region as well. First, the pandemic has shown the significant breaches that we still have as a country in health, education, social security. And this is a problem that is shared in our region. Latin America is the region that most suffered the consequences of the pandemic. The region represents only 8% of the global population, but accounted for 30% of pandemic deaths. Also, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean reports that the regional economy contracted by nearly 8% in 2020, and food insecurity tripled. These facts reveal that coronavirus has shown a difficult reality that has long been acknowledged but effectively overlooked: our inequality, the failures of our health systems, and other connected problems that go from our safety net, education, transportation, accommodation, among others. Also, in the case of Peru, we deal with other structural problems. One of the most important, the informality of our economy, the necessity of strengthening our industrial sectors and increasing our rates of tax collection. Most of the nations in the region pull in a much lower percentage of GDP in taxes than all the members countries of the OECD. Many countries in Latin America have tax receipts that are less than 20% of GDP. That figure cannot finance a proper welfare state. The pandemic has left us with many challenges. In the case of Peru, the vaccination process has been so far so good. We have 32 million people as a population in my country, and we have been able to vaccinate 49% of the population, and 68% of the population have received the first dose. No? But in the economical area, the contraction of our economy, the Peruvian GDP grew 21 years consecutively from 1999 until 2019 inclusive. But this remarkable expansion was stopped by COVID-19. The pandemic pushed the country back. And in 2020, the GDP reduces by 11%, the lowest rate in the last 3 decades. But our economy, fortunately, is recovering on a fast track. And since June 2021, we overcome the rate of growth of 1% compared with 2019, previous the pandemic. But the crisis has also revealed the strengths of Peru, such as the management of a stable macroeconomy that in the last 30 years has allowed us to face the crisis financially. Peru had the resources to be able to provide subsidies to the most affected, promoting economic reactivation measures for medium and small businesses especially, and still maintaining ourselves as a fiscally responsible economy at the country risk level. This is the outcome of a constant state policy which has transcended governments and which has forged an image of Peru as a reliable, safe, and stable country. The current context reinforces the importance of promoting people-centered public policies for development and social inclusion, which means that actions are aimed to obtain concrete results in favor of the most vulnerable population, providing them tools such as access to financing or instruments technological and strengthening their skill to facilitate their entry and stay in the labor market. One of the last measures adopted by President Pedro Castillo is to launch the implementation of the second Agrarian reform, which aims to promote the micro and small agricultural entrepreneurs that are important food suppliers for Peruvian families. Finally, and this is a key factor, a key idea to be taken into account, is that economic development must be translated into social development. And recent experience has taught us that we have to continue making progress not only in reducing material poverty and street poverty, but also in closing the distribution gaps within our society. The pandemic crisis and its impact on health, education, the quality of access to water, show us that investing in these disparities is today more than ever urgent. Through development in an economic scheme that fosters the generation of sustainable and social development with public and private investment, Peru will reduce these breaches. Thank you.
Ambassador Rodriguez, fascinating, that decline in GDP over the number of decades, and yet your government invested in small business enterprises, invested in the social, even in the face of these declining. It's great to hear that it's coming out the other side, and your growth is back up again since June. So congratulations to your government. Ambassador Vidal, the ambassador of Uruguay to Canada, you are at the end of this question, so you've got some interesting things to say, but you know what I'm going to do is when it comes to the next question, you're going to be the first.
Thank you, Joe, for applying the basic principles of diplomacy in this panel. I'm not only at the end of this table, but I think I should be at the end of my cycle here in Canada. So probably next year when this event happens maybe I'm in Montevideo. So I will allow myself a little bit of freedom to answer this question, because this is a question that is critical for everybody to ask ourselves. The last time we suffered a global pandemic was 100 years ago. So if we don't ask ourselves what have we learned about it, all the suffering, all the loss that we suffered during this year and a half, 2 years, would have been in vain. So I will go a little bit personal, hoping that my reflections resonate with some of you and hopefully with the majority of the people of my country. So I like to think that the main lesson that we learned in Uruguay from this pandemic is the importance of trust. Trust within society and trust between the people and public institutions. COVID-19 put us all in very vulnerable positions in which the most basic needs and priorities were under threat, like public health, both physical and mental. And the uncertainty of being able to take care of our families, of providing shelter, of bringing food to the table. It has become evident that the most effective way to overcome a threat, a crisis like this one, is together, collectively and cooperatively. But it's very difficult to cooperate if you don't have trust. And trust is not something that you can earn overnight. Public institutions, which in Uruguay has been historically strong, are playing a key role in this regard. State institutions are not an end in and of themselves, not are they a panacea. But if these institutions are trusted, because they provide public goods, because they are transparent and impartial, if people feel that their well-being is being protected, then the chances that they will be willingly and freely accepting their guidance will be much higher. And higher too will be the chances to overcome a crisis like this one than a scenario without credible points of reference. Governments have a huge responsibility in protecting and building this trust in public institutions and in providing public goods. By listening to science, like in Uruguay we did by the creation of the scientific advisory group, by not denying or hiding the reality, by leading by example, by being transparent, by showing the respect towards and trusting your own people, by not using this crisis to divide, but to unite, the government has helped to promote trust, and with that, to manage the pandemic in a fairly effective way. I hope that this was the lesson that we learned in Uruguay.
Ambassador, that was a great way to end it. Trust in institutions, trust in people. When you're going through a crisis like that, that trust is so essential for the confidence of the population, and thank you for your response. That was really well done. I wonder if we could have a round of applause for all 8 ambassadors. So now we're going to move on to the practical. We're going to look on to the future, and I'm going to ask each one of the ambassadors, starting with Ambassador Vidal from Uruguay, the new trends and opportunities in trade, services, and investment are now beginning to reemerge. What role can your country's relationship, particularly with Canada, we have a vested interest in that, of course, what lies ahead?
All right. So 2 of the main drivers of a post-COVID recovery in Uruguay, I think align very well to Canada's approach. One is the sustainable investment / financial, sustainable finance, and the other one is technology, the digital economy. Uruguay's goal is for this recovery to be inclusive and sustainable, combining economic growth, the creation of jobs, with improvement of the population's living conditions through investments that have been that have a positive, measurable, and verifiable impact on social and sustainability indicators. Uruguay is designing, for example, the first sovereign sustainability-linked bond, which will be linked to environmental indicators. Also, we attach utmost priority to ESG investments, confident of our credentials and commitment, not only towards the environmental pillar of ESG, but also in terms of social justice, the respect of the rule of law and human rights. Being the test lab that we are in Uruguay, we have shown that we can make big strides toward net zero in a very short period of time, having almost completely decarbonized the energy production in Uruguay in a little more than a decade, thanks to a predictable legal framework that has brought massive investment in wind, solar, and biomass energy production in Uruguay. The technology sector is another one in which Canada and Uruguay share substantive complementarities. On one hand, Canadian tech companies find in Uruguay a stable and vibrant platform from where to provide services in other countries in South America. And also, on the other hand, there are opportunities for Uruguayan firms to land in Canada and from here to grow in the North American market, thanks to programs, for example, like LATAM Startups, which have been successfully helping Uruguayan firms to accelerate and expand from Toronto, from here.
Sorry, you know, we've heard over the last number of days, Ambassador, that the opportunities that exist in Canada, that exist in your country as well, and in the technology sector, and the necessity here, I'm not sure in your country, but the necessity here to really, really open our doors, the demand for skilled labor in general anyway, so the immigration policies and the open door policies that exist in Canada to welcome you folks and your countrymen here is something that's going to help propel our economy as well. So thank you for those remarks. Ambassador Rodriguez from Peru, over to you. What's ahead in terms of trade, investment, and particularly between your country and this country?
Okay, thank you. Well, I forgot to tell that it is good to be back in in-person events after a year. So I'm very comfortable to be here with all you all. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, has exposed basic national needs that have not yet been covered in recent decades. The crisis has emphasized the current urgency to attract foreign investors in key sectors for human development such as education, water, sanitation, health, connectivity. The importance of attracting foreign capital is not limited to closing the gap or deficit in infrastructure that the country is experiencing, which adds up to around $100 billion, but also promoting inclusive economic growth that generates employment and greater income for Peruvian families by reducing the social inequalities and ensuring a better distribution of national wealth. The current context has made investment needs of developing countries known, turning into attractive new business opportunities for those nations that show macroeconomic and political stability, being Peru one of them in Latin America. Proof of this is the recent successful issuance of sustainable bonds by the Peruvian government for a total of $4 billion in pursuit of financing projects that generate positive impacts on the environment and promote access to health, housing, and education services. This year, private investment in Peru will be around $41.7 billion, which will imply a growth of 21% compared to the register in 2020. It is observed that the economic recovery continues strongly, and the growth was higher than we expected in recent months. The production for July of this year exceeds that the reported in the same period of 2019, pre-pandemic. Last September, President Pedro Castillo has launched a comprehensive investment programs focused in water sanitation, health, education, connectivity, with emphasis to be working with the small and medium enterprises and to be working at the local and regional government. Canada is one of the main foreign investors in Peru, especially in the mining and financial sectors. With Canada, we are APEC economies, we have a free trade agreement, we have an agreement on promotion and protection of investment, we have an agreement to avoid a double taxation, we are part of the CPTPP, we share values and principles as a rule of law, protection and promotion of human rights, name it. We are like-minded countries. And Canada is very important for us. It's a country whose high standards in environmental protection and social responsibility coincide with the capital attraction policies that Peru wishes to promote. Peru, as I mentioned, sees Canada as a like-minded country and shares many features with it, like the presence of indigenous people, the management of natural resources in delicate environmental situations with an impact of vulnerable populations, commercial and cultural openness to the world, and our bilateral relationship has deepened in the last 77 years with important areas of interest in trade, investment, environment, development cooperation, and shared vision of the global challenges we face. The Peruvian goal now is that by this year, we will grow more than 10.5%, and by 2022, more than 4.8%, with an average of 5.5% in the period 2021-2025. That the IMF has indicated that these projections are feasible and will place our country as one of with the highest growth in the region on this and next year. For all these facts, Peru becomes an interesting place for Canadian investors with whom we also share the same values and world trends such as I mentioned, environmental protection, respect of society, good governance, and respect and equality. Recovery our economies from the pandemic would not be possible without a sustained state policy of trade openness and attraction of the foreign investment. In this sense, Peru sees Canada as a key strategic partner to work for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And your comments about, wow, 21% coming back, it just shows how far down everything went and how resilient your economy is, and the growth rates of 4 or 5% that the IMF believes is achievable, and will have one of the highest growth rates of everywhere in South America. Congratulations, well done.
Thank you.
That's really good. Ambassador Ricardo, thank you for that. El Salvador, in terms of coming out of this crisis, in terms of new opportunities and trade with Canada?
Yes, well, during the pandemic, obviously many Salvadorians lost their jobs, and the government decided to have very comprehensive plans for recovery of the economy, of the social integration of the population. I would say that probably the most important for the Salvadorian perspective is that we know that the economic development of our country depends also on the economic development of the Central American region. We are very focused on promoting the economic integration of all the Central American countries. And we believe that creating a common infrastructure for the countries will be also a boost for our economy of El Salvador. So I think in this perspective, Canadian companies have the opportunity to invest in El Salvador and in Central America. We also believe that we need to be integrated into the global and digital economy in the world. So Canadian companies can have the opportunity to invest under the form of concessions, PPPs, leasing, loans, in different large events, large projects that we want to develop in El Salvador. One of them is, for example, the expansion of the airport, the existing airport in El Salvador. We would like to enlarge it and create a cluster for aeronautic services for the region. We have the intention also to create a train, the Pacific train, that will be linking El Salvador to the other countries of the region. And for example, there we can have the opportunity to invest on sustainable transportation. The creation also of a ferry that will be joining Costa Rica with El Salvador. 600 kilometers of connectivity with our brother country of Costa Rica. We also have the project of integration, the different ports of existing in El Salvador. Other project in tourism, like Surf City, which is a touristic project for my country. So I would say it's the opportunity to invest on technology and sustainable projects for the region. One of them is also, for example, the technology in hydrogen. That I know that Canada is very advanced on this new green technologies. Also in education, I mentioned the fact that we are providing to the students 1.2 million of laptops, but we also need to teach them how to make use of these new technologies. And for example, online education is something that Canada, because of the large extension of this territory, has to provide. And this kind of technology is now something that we use and we need in our country in order to provide education in languages, in English, in French, to be able to help our population. We know that there's a shortage of labor here in Canada, and from Central American perspective, we are ready to provide part of our labor under the form of temporary workers program. That will secure immigration. That will discourage irregular immigration to these countries and encouraging young populations to be integrated into the global economy. And at the same time, we'll be helping Canadian companies with the labor shortage that they are facing here. So this also gives us the opportunity to create programs in which we will be helping Canadian economy, and at the same time, you will be helping our society to grow and to become better prepared for the future. In El Salvador, we don't have a free trade agreement with Canada, and this is something we are looking forward to negotiate and to sign. That will give us a framework for better business with the Canadian companies and to invite them to invest in El Salvador. So if I would say to the question of the learnings, I say solidarity matters. Nobody can be left aside from the technology development. We strongly believe in that. We strongly believe into the integration of Central American countries, integrate Central America into the global economy, and we would like to see Canada, and we would like Canada to see us as real partners for investments and for the future, and to really create win-win situations in which we can provide some help and solidarity with our brother country, Canada. So that would be our learnings from the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Ricardo, and I can tell you that we would welcome any help that you can provide with your countrymen coming in, and you know, we've gone through this, what they are calling the Great Resignation. I have no idea what's happened to our workers, but your offer to come and assist is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. His Excellency Stacy, the Ambassador of Ecuador to Canada. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I take this question as a call for action to defeat COVID and create opportunities to the reactivation of the economy. It comes to my mind the words of Greta Thunberg, blah, blah, blah. And also the dino at the UN Assembly calling for urgent actions. There has been a gradual adaptation of people, business, public and private sectors, and other entities toward trends and opportunities emerging under the new reality we are living. Among major steps taken in that direction, The government of Ecuador is implementing reforms, legal reforms, aiming to create jobs, achieve fiscal stability, and seek an orderly and healthy management of public finances and spending, as well as enhancing productivity and promoting investments. Following the economic study of ECLAC, Ecuador is planning investments toward sectors that promote a new style of development and that can enhance competitiveness, employment, and lower environmental footprint. These are the transition to renewable energy, sustainable mobility, digital revolution, universal access to technologies, health manufacturing industries, bioeconomy and ecosystem services, care economy, the circular economy, and the sustainable tourism. In the third quarter of this year, the GDP of Ecuador grew close to 8% in comparison to the same period in 2020, while 270,000 jobs have been created in 4 months, and tax collection is increasing, signaling a sustained economic reactivation and growth. We have proclaimed something related also to Canada, but more Ecuador in the world and more world in Ecuador, which synthesizes our ideal of a more competitive country projected abroad in search of opportunities. In this sense, one of the main socio-economic strategy is to have more access to global markets through free trade agreements. Within them, we hope with Canada to strengthen employment and technology, expand international trade openness, and facilitate local and foreign private investments. The model relies heavily on the private sector and seeks public-private alliances and partnerships, mainly in the oil, mineral, telecommunications, infrastructures, energy, and digital technologies. More than 500 million in projects such as new roads, ports, concession of airports, and the sale of some assets are under consideration. At the same time, Ecuador is offering incentives to mining investments under the criteria of efficiency, transparency, social and environmental responsibility. In the field of environmental protection, Ecuador announced in COP26 the extension of the marine reserve of the Galapagos Islands, pursuing debt swaps for projects related to climate change and conservancy. From other side, public companies, which the government wants to divest, are being considered for privatization in mid-2022, opening a great opportunity to international investors. It is estimated at 30 billion, the investment amount in the next 4 years. Ecuador environment is friendly to private investments, and the role of the state will continue to be that of social protection, consistent with the Agenda 2030. For this objective, it promotes public policy that will reduce poverty and eliminate child malnutrition, a problem that unfortunately, after years of lack of attention, will persist in most vulnerable communities. In the case of Canada, a country that belongs to our continent and to the inter-American system, there is a reliable and a strategic partnership with our region. According to the statistics of the Central Bank of Ecuador, in 2020, Canada remained the first foreign investors in Ecuador. For Ecuador, international trade and investments agreements are part of the current strategy for a sustainable economic recovery and to generate more jobs. Therefore, negotiations of such instruments with Canada are key to strengthen our relations, increasing the current balances of trade and promoting investments. Certainly, Ecuador has a dynamic diplomatic, economic, academic, and cultural agenda reflecting 60 years of fruitful relations with Canada, and is grateful for the support received under the current circumstances, consisting especially in vaccines and medical donations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. One of the recurring themes throughout the comments that I'm hearing is the need for a free trade agreement between your countries and Canada. And I just wanted to let you know that we've just heard that the Deputy Prime Minister Freeland is going to be joining us later this morning. So I would encourage you to stick around, have a conversation with her, and talk about the importance of the free trade agreements.
Thank you.
Next up, the Ambassador to Costa Rica, His Excellency Ortiz. Over to you, sir.
Yes, Mr. Clark, thank you. Gracias. Well, before I answer you that question, I have a question also for the Canadians and the private sector of Canada. How comfortable do you feel by having your portfolio of industry and services so tight with one economy? Traditionally, Canada trade with the U.S. was 89%, now it's 76%. If you want to diversify that services and industry, well, Latin America offers you an excellent opportunity for the Canadian private sector to invest and to profit from many opportunities that we have in our region, not only Costa Rica. So it's a question, a philosophical question, if I say, to the private sector especially, that you have to look farther, from the South. That I understand is the United States is a great trade partner with Canada, so is with Costa Rica, but it's important for all of us, for all the countries, to diversify that portfolio strategically and commercial as well. Canada and Costa Rica have a successful trade agreement since 2002, but there is no opportunities, and I will mention that, on mining, on oil and gas. Costa Rica decided to protect the environment, to ban mining, to ban gas, and to ban oil exploration. So we decided that years ago with the reason that is obvious, to protect our forestry, to protect the lands of our indigenous people, and to bring tourism that will appreciate nature without those industries on the surroundings. So saying that and being very specific, there are opportunities in Costa Rica for many Canadian sectors. One that I see is the sector of energy, specifically hydrogen, like Ambassador Cisneros mentioned. Costa Rica and Canada just signed a few months ago MOU between the Association of Canadian Fuel and Hydrogen Association and the Costa Rican Association for Hydrogen. Canada has been producing blue and gray hydrogen for more than 100 years. Costa Rica have the first pilot plant in Latin America that produce on a small scale green hydrogen. So I see a very good opportunity for Canadians to invest in that area. Of course, we have to develop the markets, but Costa Rica can be the hub for Central America and the Caribbean for Canadian investors in that area. Other area specifically that I see of opportunity for the Canadian sector is tourism. Canadians represent the second largest amount of visitors after the U.S. in Costa Rica. So it's a very dynamic sector. Air Canada have many flights to Costa Rica on weekly basis, and it's a very profitable service and business for Air Canada. We have also a big investments also from the Canadian banking industry, from Scotia Bank has been in Costa Rica for many years with a successful project. And we also see opportunities for Canadians on the medical industry, on education, on health, and very important, we want to attract the Canadian private sector to participate on the infrastructure projects. And there are three ways that Canada can participate on that. One is through CCC with the G2G agreements, government-to-government agreements. The second is via the APP or P3 agreements, you know, that's the public-private alliances. Canada is a world leader on those alliances and can play a very important role in Costa Rica. And the other area is on the international tenders that we also publish openly. So I see many opportunities in those areas. We created in Costa Rica an institution called CINDE, that is a non-profit institution that gives support for the Canadian private sector for information and that will guide you to the process to learn about more about our country and our legal framework. So those areas I see of opportunity for Canada. And Costa Rica have also opportunities in Canada as well. We produce not only the traditional products that you find in the markets, agro-industry, you know, you find a very good coffee in Canada, papayas, watermelons, and other products that are especially in the winter time here. But also, if you check your computer and your microchip is Intel, most likely that microchip was built in Costa Rica. We have more than 350 multinationals established in Costa Rica. They are attracted because we produce almost 100% of our energy from clean energy. We have a strong, smart labor force. I'm not going to say cheap labor force, but I will say smart labor force. We want to those industries to value our people by their knowledge, and not necessarily by necessarily labor force, but knowledge, intense. And we have an office here in Toronto that is being led by Michelle Corriols, that is here with us today, and Valeria Lopez, two excellent professionals that are willing to give excellent information and provide all what is needed for the Canadian importers as well. So there are opportunities in both ways, very concrete opportunities. We have a trade agreement since 2002, and we are welcome and eager to call the attention of the Canadian private sector to participate in Costa Rica.
Thank you, Ambassador. Just a quick aside, you were talking about produce and exports and so on. My friend Jennifer Patterson, who's with Invest Hamilton Niagara, we had a roundtable discussion between the port authorities in Hamilton, Niagara, Welland, Oshawa, and the port authorities in Florida, because a great deal of the produce that comes from South America stops first in Florida, gets redistributed, and then brought into Canada. And so trying to remove some of those bottlenecks so that it can come up more quickly. So your comments just reminded me of that conversation, how important that trade is between South America and Canada and getting all those delicious foods that you produce down there. Thank you very much for your comments. We're now going to go over to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Colombia to Canada, Ambassador Lodono. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Just to say that the supply chain shortage has benefited Colombia in several ways. Colombia is an oil producer. Today, its international price is higher than expected. Colombia is a coffee producer, and its international price is also higher than expected. Colombian exports to Canada have increased more than 60% this year compared with 2020. And we are going to reach the highest export numbers in our trade history. There are several advantages that Canada has seen with the Colombian relationship. First, we have developed a near-shoring strategy that is working very well. Colombia and Canada are in the same time zone, and it is possible to get goods from Colombia in just a few days by ship. To be a tropical country makes Colombia a complementary economy in terms of fruits and vegetables. Because our power matrix is more than 75% supported by renewables, it is easier for Canada to develop its energy transition program with allies like Colombia. Considering all those aspects, we are working very hard to double our trade and investment with Canada by 2025. And we started this year with a strong trend looking at that goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Colombia has a special place, not just for Canada, but also for the Toronto Global Forum. I think your presidents over the number of years have come up to this forum at least 3 times, business delegations coming up, interacting with Canadian businesses. So congratulations.
We had our president yesterday.
That's correct.
And usually our president comes to this forum.
In person.
And we are celebrating this year our 10th anniversary of a free trade agreement also. So we are working very, very close with Canada during the last decade.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Table 1. It has been a while.
I leave here first.
But really interesting discussion.
I don't
Back where we began.
At the end.
It's okay.
No, please.
So, Ambassador of Chile to Canada, Ambassador Fernandez, a look ahead. Where are we going? What about trade between our countries? Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to raise the value of free trade agreements. Chile has more than 30 FTAs, and with Canada, well, next year we are going to celebrate 25 years since we signed our agreement. And I must to say that the FTAs have been a tremendous tool to the economy now that we are facing those challenges due to the long lockdown. Then for us, FTAs remain as for us a very, very important tool in our exchange. Well, which kind of recovery we are looking for? A green recovery. We are doing our best to have a green economy and a green recovery. Basis mainly in 2 areas, digital and clean energies. In digital, well, we are going to construct a transoceanic digital cable who go from Chile through New Zealand and to Australia, connecting the country with Oceania and from there to Asia. Well, Chile is a country with small size, no? Then to be to have economic viability, well, we have more partners. And Argentina and Brazil has already joined this project. And we hope that my other neighbor countries will join also. Paraguay and Uruguay are very interesting, Bolivia too, and we will see what is happening afterward. But it's a very, very important initiative. Digital is one of the tools of the present, not of the future. No? We have seen in this lockdown how important has been the virtuality. No? The second thing in terms of the digital is we already signed a digital economic partnership agreement with New Zealand and Singapore. And that agreement, the purpose is to have a development of a regulatory framework. And Canada is starting what that you call consultation in order to join this agreement. You know that with Canada we are working a lot in many areas, trade and gender, trade and indigenous people, and I think that that is a new path that could be very, very useful to have this digital economy partnership agreement. And second, in regard with clean energy, well, as some other colleagues mentioned, Chile is potentially one of the most important producers of green hydrogen. And what means green hydrogen? It's very important because one of the most important sectors in the Chilean economy is mining. Canada is one of the most important mining investors in Chile also. And if we produce green hydrogen, well, that will help us in all this enormous truck that we use in mining. And one of our purpose and target is to have a decarbonization mining sector in 2040. Then, if we can go through this roadmap, well, we will get it, and for Chile will be very, very important. And the last thing that I want to raise is electromobility. By 2035, hundreds of vehicles sold in Chile will be zero emission. And of course, Canada can join us and work with us in this and other challenges objective. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, thank you. And I think there are great opportunities. Chile has a special place in my heart and the hearts of all of our colleagues here at the Toronto Global Forum. One of your biggest exports is a woman by the name of Francisca Insulza, who you know well. Francisca brings Chile to the table every day, and as you know, her father was the Secretary General of the OAS, so I thank you for that export in particular. And Her Excellency, Ambassador Martinez of Argentina, yes. It's over to you for the final remarks, and the best is yet to come.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Thank you. And, well, I'm the last one, so I have the benefit of having heard all my colleagues' interventions. Very important, interesting, and so many things in common with our countries. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. So for answering the question and as far as opportunities in trade, services, and investments that have emerged, and the role that our country, our country's relationship with Canada, let me go back a little bit to our previous idea of this change of paradigm in terms of our productive structure, and our bet, the need to rely heavily on knowledge, education, science, and technology, as we mentioned. And in fact, the knowledge economy for a country like us presents a great opportunity. And let me tell you why. Argentina has several comparative advantages in this sector in particular, starting from an outstanding pool of highly educated population and professionals widely recognized for their talent and their expertise. We also have, as many of other colleagues mentioned for the countries themselves, good access to information technologies and favorable time zones to work with North American and European firms. These are elements that we want to promote, and in fact, our country has a thriving startup ecosystem. Before the pandemic, there were 5 Argentine unicorns. Nowadays, we have 11. So this is just an example of our population's entrepreneurship and the quality of our human capital. Our government is supporting these sectors through instruments such as the Knowledge Economy Act, which is a piece of legislation that provides several tax benefits to businesses that obtain 70% or more of their revenue from the knowledge-based activities. These benefits include an exemption from export taxes and services, a rebate of up to 60% of the corporate income tax, and tax credit that can be applied to labor taxes. Needless to say, this is a sector that will be a reliable source for high-quality jobs and exports in the coming decades. And here is one of the sectors in which we believe Canada can play an important role in our bilateral relationship. First of all, of course, Canada's market is full of wealthy and sophisticated consumers, the kind of the ones that demand services of our tech sector is able to provide. Moreover, Canadian firms and funds can be a source of investment for our businesses, our thriving ecosystem back home. I will just mention one example. Take the case of Bitfarms. Bitfarms is a cryptocurrency mining company that was founded by 2 Argentine entrepreneurs, and it operates several mining facilities in Quebec and has recently announced the opening of a new production plant in Argentina, as well as a smaller one in Paraguay, neighborhood Paraguay. So this is just one example of the scope of synergies that exist between our countries. Of course, there are opportunities for increased cooperation with Canada in many other sectors, certainly. It's not restricted to emerging technologies. And I will also add what some of my colleagues already pointed out. Mining, clean energies and mining are 2 sectors in which Canada is a leading country, and it's also a major investor in Argentina and in Latin America in general. And again, a couple of weeks ago during the G20 summit, our leaders, the president of Argentina and Canadian prime minister, they had a bilateral meeting, and they were discussing in that context how our 2 countries can promote sustainable mining, being it so important nowadays. And so there is a point of confluence between our environmental goals and the need for our countries to develop. I thank you, my colleagues, for the mentioning of free trade agreements, because this gives me the opportunity to mention that Argentina, together with our Mercosur partners, the Southern Common Market, we are negotiating a free trade agreement with Canada, and progress has been steady in spite of the challenges posed by the pandemic. My colleague from Chile mentioned already some sectors in particular for these free trade agreements. We think that these negotiations are going to be, when we conclude them, are going to be very important ones in a sense that this is an agreement that aims to be a 3rd generation agreement that includes chapters as important as gender issues and indigenous issues and human rights standards. And in this sense, we are very much excited to see the conclusion of the agreement as soon as negotiations finish. That's another piece of information that I wanted to share with you. And of course, and this is something very close to my heart, I would say. So to finish, let me stress that all policies have to be very much embedded in mainstreaming gender and harnessing women's capacity. I mean, the idea is that this is essential to be in all policy areas. So, and in that, Canada, it's also a leading partner and has initiatives that we look into frequently. So, I don't want to take too much of the time. I know that this is time of the essence here, but I want to invite you all. If you're interested in knowing more about the topics we mentioned here, to reach out to the embassy, to our colleagues here, our Consul General also present. And then it will be our pleasure to continue discussions. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was a great end to that discussion. I want to congratulate all of you because we're actually under an hour and a half. And I was told that it would take at least 2 hours. So your comments are excellent. One final point I mentioned about Francisca and Souza. I have just hired a new executive director from Argentina, Ali Ponti. So we have a very definite bias at the Toronto Global Forum for South America. So thank you for that. I just wanted to get back to Michael Thompson for a moment, the deputy mayor. In setting all of this up in 2014, I thought at the time it would be, a couple of years and we'd get through the Pan Am Games. He enjoys this discussion so much that he's embedded it now as a permanent feature of the Toronto Global Forum. So this year with the ambassadors has been extraordinary. Can we show our appreciation, please? So I have a quick ask of all of you. You will have seen a number of fresh, bright faces as you're coming into this room and going into the Cogeco studio and so on. The City of Toronto has provided us with about 7 or 8 young college university graduates to come and work as interns here to help us out. And in return, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves to them. They are looking for jobs. They are very well qualified, most of them in IT, tech, consultancy, and they would very much appreciate it if you would introduce yourselves, swap business cards, let them know that you'll help if you can. So if you do that, that would be great. My second one is an invitation to all of you to enjoy our hospitality, enjoy the very interesting discussions that are taking place right now in the Cogeco room just down the hall, and please stick around. The Deputy Prime Minister would very much like to meet you later on this morning as she makes her way to the Toronto Global Forum. Once again, thank you, ambassadors, and thank you very much for attending.